Hi, welcome to Theology Thursday. I've been doing these for a few years, and I guess today we're going to tackle a subject that really gets people fired up. We're going to talk about music in church. So let's just dive right into it. A few years ago, a man named John Frame, theology professor at Westminster Seminary, wrote a book called Contemporary Worship Music, A Biblical Defense. And so this was a book basically defending using modern music in worship services. Now, some people don't like that. For other people, it needs to be one of these. It needs to be a hymn book. I'll talk about this here in a minute and where hymn books come from. And yet other people like, you know what? I like to stream music on my phone. That's kind of what I want to do. And so digital is really the way to go. So what I want to do is I want to just talk about worship music, a little bit of the history, some of the issues, and kind of where I'm at and what I think about music in church and its place and significance. There were two brothers, John Wesley and Charles Wesley. John was more of the preacher and the organizer. Charles was a hymn writer. When I say hymns, we mean songs that were written to be sung in church. In his lifetime, Charles Wesley wrote over 6,500 hymns. Over 6,500. Now, songs began to be collected in what were called hymn books. And so you would have these books that would have songs in them to be sung in church, and churches would purchase them, and then everyone in the church, they have usually like a place to put them on the back of the seats or the pews, or they would have them in stacks. You pick them up when you come in, put them back when you leave, and whoever's leading worship would get up and say, turn to hymn number such and such. Like in this case, opened at 305, I have decided to follow Jesus, and people could sing along in church because they had the words right here. Had the music as well. If you could read music, you could sing parts or what have you. And so this was basically a collection of songs intended to be sung in church. In this particular hymn book that I have here, and this is the Baptist hymnal. This one was produced in 1991, so it's about 30 years old. In this hymn book, it's interesting. There are hymns from Charles Wesley. 16 of them to be exact. 16 hymns. Mathematically, that works out to 0.25% of Wesley's hymns made it into the hymn book. Now, why is that? Well, the reason is probably because most of them weren't good enough to survive. A lot of hymns, but the ones in a hymn book from modern times are only going to have the hymns that had staying power, the ones that continue to be sung in churches and continue to be used. And so only a very, 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 very small percentage of Wesley's hymns made it. The rest of them kind of disappeared. So here's what we have. That's just Wesley. And there are lots of other people who wrote lots and lots and lots, Ira Sankey and others, who wrote lots and lots of hymns. So we have a few really old hymns that survived because they were good in theology and perhaps because they were good musically as well. What that means is, when we come to contemporary worship music, we should expect that the overwhelming majority of them are not going to survive. They're not going to last because they're just not that good. There'll be some that'll last probably for a long time, but we don't know probably what they'll be. Some, I think that song will stay, but we don't know. So the idea behind music written for worship is still the same. Lots of songs are being written even today, but very few will survive to be passed down to future generations. Just like tens of thousands of hymns were written, especially in the 1800s. But not many of them have survived. I mean, they may have survived somewhere, in a museum or someplace. They've got all these hymns that were written, but they're not sung. Many of them never even probably got put to music. And so we're kind of in the same situation. It's always been that way. Most that were written don't make it in. Now, one of the issues with modern worship music is that in the mid-1990s, if it was a popular worship song, it would be sung in churches for an average of about 12 years. It had a life cycle of pretty regular use for about 12 years. Today, the life cycle is down to about 4 or 5 years. They go over quickly. People get tired of them, I guess, rather quickly, or something new, and they want new and fresh. Chris Walker, who's a worship leader, said this about music in church and this really short life cycle of contemporary songs and these songs, hymns that have been around for a long time. So this is what he said. He said, in a lot of churches, a song has to be either 300 years old, that would be a hymn book, or it has to be 3 days old. He said, the middle ground is purgatory. What he was saying is a song from the 1980s is probably not going to be sung in church today. It's got to be a song that was written last year or 2 or 3 years ago. Songs even from the 90s or the aughts, the 2000s, are not going to be that popular. People want the new and the fresh, so it makes it very, very difficult because it's either got to be old and established or it has to be very, very new. And I think that's a disservice because I think there was good music written in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and even the teens. Okay? Now, my personal opinion is that there are some newer songs that will stand the test of time because I think the theology behind them is good. I think the music is pretty good, even if they at some point rewrite the music. Awesome God by Rich Mullins. To me, it's just like how great thou art. I mean, it's just been around. Matter of fact, how great is our God is a song I think that'll be around for decades and maybe even millennia. 10,000 Reasons. That's another older song that still gets a lot of play in churches. Your Great Name is one of my favorite worship songs. I love worship songs that focus on God and His greatness, not Jesus is my boyfriend kind of stuff, but really celebrate the glory and majesty of God. Your Great Name is one of those. I don't know if Oceans will be around. It still gets a lot of play. It's an older worship song. We'll see. I think The Great I Am, because it comes right out of Scripture. And then probably The Heart of Worship, because it's so significant. And there are others, but those are just a few that I think, out of all the hundreds of worship songs that have been written over the last 20 years or 30 years, I think those are some that have the right theology and good musicality to really survive. Now, for those of you who think, no, it just needs to be the older songs, the reality is you have no reason for that other than emotional. They're what you're comfortable with, what you grew up with, they're nostalgic, or whatever the reason is. You have to remember, there is no such thing as an old song. Every song is new. Every single song is new. It's just some of them were new 200 or 300 years ago. They're not old. They're always new. Every song was new. It's just, when was it new? Even Amazing Grace was new. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't realize that the song Amazing Grace, there was a move to fire Isaac over writing that song because we don't need this newfangled music. So even songs, I like the old songs. No, you don't. You like the songs that were new a long time ago. Had been around a while. But every song at some point was new, and some of them are new and good and last, and others are new and maybe not so good and don't last. Now, some people ask, is there such a thing as sacred music? I don't like that phrase, sacred music. I don't believe it. I think you can worship to lots of different music styles and instrumentation and tempos. And personally, for music, I really like classic rock, I like heavy metal, I really like new metal, acid rock. I mean, the kind of music that I like. And it's funny, people say, how do you worship to that? It's like, man, it's the energy, the enthusiasm. I don't believe that worship is to be quiet and reflective for the most part. I believe that it's supposed to be energetic and intense. And so that's what I like. So I don't think there's a sacred music and everything else is somehow not sacred. Martin Luther went to the bar and got some songs and put in Christian words, but kept the music. And some of those you sing from the hymn book. They were done 500 years ago, and we're still singing them. See, the message is what's important, not the packaging. A song that's got great music but bad theology is not good. It really is the messaging more than the packaging. However, and to me this is very important, there are two kinds of worship music. There is individual worship music. That's what I like. That's what I enjoy when I am by myself or driving down the road on my motorcycle or in the car. It's the music that moves me personally to worship God. And that can be any kind you want. I don't care if it's hip hop. I don't care if it's this classical, hymn kind of stuff. I don't care if it's Christian rock. It doesn't matter the style, whatever it is that you like. But it's music that leads you to worship the Lord. However, public worship music needs to be singable by a lot of people who are together. That means typically very fast music that's has a really weird kind of offbeat rhythm to it that's a lot more complicated and difficult to sing. Though it may be great for you personally, singing along in the car, it's very, very difficult for, 75 people or 7,500 people, however many it is, to sing together. Worship music publicly needs to be singable. So not only does it need to be good theology, it needs to be something they can sing. And here's where it becomes interesting. Most churches today do a lot more contemporary music. My grandchildren, this is hard to sing. A lot of the songs in the hymn book use these and thous and thinkest and other words that confuses them. They can't worship to that because they can't even sing it because they don't even understand it. So it needs to be singable and understandable if it's designed to be done in corporate worship. Individually, whatever floats your boat, that's great. But corporately, I believe music needs to be at a rhythm and a pace, and the wording comes at a pace that the majority of people can sing it. It doesn't go from extreme highs to extreme lows and doesn't have all kinds of fancy stuff. It's pretty basic and vanilla when it comes to corporate worship, because you don't want people to not sing because they can't sing it. I don't mean they can't carry a tune. I mean, it's too difficult. It's too complex and complicated. So I think that public worship music should be simpler. And so because the purpose of corporate worship music is that we worship together. And so, as long as it's singable, I'll sing it. And it may not be a style I like, but I can still worship to it personally, as long as I can sing along with everybody else in the room. But if it just sounds like a bunch of cats screaming in a room because nobody can be together because the music's too complicated, that makes it extremely difficult to worship. It just turns into a cacophony of noise. And so whether it's a room full of people singing How Great Thou Art, or it's a room full of people singing How Great Is Our God, songs that were written hundreds of years apart, both of those are very similar in theology. Both of them are pretty easy for a congregation of people of lots of variety of backgrounds to be able to sing. So for me, public worship music needs to be singable. Now let me show you the difference between like hymns and contemporary music, why I think both of them can work. So here are the lyrics to a song that, at least for the chorus, to Up from the Grave, or sometimes it goes by the title, He Arose. Up from the grave he arose, with a mighty triumph o'er his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Man, that's a great song. That is a great, great song. The lyrics are fantastic, no matter what music you might put to it. The fact that Christ has given us the victory, we're going to reign with him forever, that he arose. Man, hallelujah, he arose. Okay? There's another song that's been written about death and the fact that we don't fear it because Christ has risen. And it is by a nu metal Christian band. Quite a few of you listening to this probably wouldn't like this band or their music, but regardless, I want you to look at the lyrics to this song. When time outruns my soul, meaning when I die. I don't have to hide. Fear is not my guide. I won't be made to hold any word inside. Fear is not my guide. Man, those are great lyrics too. Those are great words. Fantastic words. Because fear is not my guide. Because when time outruns my soul, I don't have to hide. I'm not worried. Fear is not my guide because death holds no power over me. So even though different musical styles, the lyrics still carry a great message. So let me just summarize everything that I've said. There are a lot of great songs that are hundreds of years old, but there were lots and lots more of them that weren't that great and haven't survived. When it comes to contemporary music, there are lots and lots and lots of songs, and let's be honest, many of them aren't that great. But there are some that are really great and probably will stand the test of time. So because we've seen in my lifetime a transition from this to this in many, many, many churches, including the churches that I've pastored, I realize we're in some ways the test generation. The new songs are being tested out on us, and those that are really good theologically and musically, we still sing, some of them 20, 30 years old or older, because they're good. And so I believe that they will stand the test of time. So if a song's not great, okay, it'll eventually get shuffled out. If a song is great, it will remain. But what makes a song great, at least for corporate worship, is the theology is sound and the music is relatively simple and easy so that the majority of people can sing it and worship together. So I hope this just helps you a little bit, at least what I think about music, but also some about the way kind of music works and why we have a hymn book and why so many of those hymns we don't sing anymore. Like about 6,486 of Charles Wesley's that have not made it into a modern hymn book. So God bless you, and whether you're alone or in a group, man, when you're singing, I hope it leads you to worship the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. God bless you.